Hi everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Reviews. So today in for review is this watch from Selhor, or Selhor. I think I'm going to go with Selhor. So Selhor is a new micro brand on the scene, but it can trace its roots back all the way to 1947. So let's take a closer look at this vintage inspired dive watch. But let's kick this off with a little bit about who Selhor are. Started in 1947 in eastern France and was founded by a gentleman called Charles Callier. The brand was known for its dive and chronograph watches, and throughout the years it made a lot of dive watches. You can find some on eBay, the original ones. In 1965 the brand really fizzled away, but at the time it was a real competitor to Lip, Lejour, Yema. Yema's had a real resurgence at the time, so I think this company is trying to certainly piggyback on this newfound love of French vintage watchmaking. They kicked off with a Rallye chronograph watch and they put a VK63 mecha quartz movement in there, and thankfully this is the 3 sub-dial version and not the VK64 we see so often. The next release was the Diver 05. This one looks like a very handsome watch, and you'd be forgiven for thinking this wasn't maybe a distant cousin to some of the Yema Superman divers. This one was priced at $240, which I think was pretty reasonable, and that brings us to today, where we're reviewing the brand new vintage diver, as Selhor are calling it, and they have sent this into the channel, so a big thanks to them for sending me this in for review. Before we kick off the review, let's look at those all important case measurements. So we have a 42mm case, gorgeous vintage cushion case, which we'll talk about more shortly. A thickness of only 12.5mm, which is pretty good for an automatic watch, certainly a diver. We have a lug width of 20mm, and those lugs are nicely recessed into the case. Automatic Miyota 9015 movement, and we have a 200-meter water resistance, which for some reason they've left off both the dial and the back of the case. I often look at vintage dive watches on eBay, and those cushion cases from those early divers, they don't hold up over time. Typically they were coated base metal. They really wore down quite badly. You don't often find a fantastic example, in my experience, of a cushion case watch on eBay. This one is completely stainless steel, so you're not going to get any of that same wearing. Nicely brushed. They've done an excellent job of this cushion case. The highlights for me is the crown, nicely proportioned, easy to grip. It is screw down on this model. The bezel is a real star as well. It's a coin edge bezel, but it only has the coin edge on the very top end. Very easy to grip. The action on this is really nice. It's very solid when you turn it. The lugs are recessed into the case, but it means that the bracelet fits very snugly to the wrist. Not only is the bracelet very comfortable, but the center of gravity is towards the back of the case here, so when you're wearing it, it hugs the wrist very nicely. I thought it might hang off my wrist or move around, but it doesn't do that at all. The mechanics of how they've machined this case is surprisingly comfortable to wear. You've got that slightly concave of the case back and rectangular shape of the case, and because the back of your wrist is usually relatively flat, here you can see it on my 7.2-inch wrist. Flipping it over quickly, the back of the case for me made me smile. You'll have to let me know in the comment section down below, because I can't quite remember which watch it was, but that engraving of the diver's helmet, I've certainly seen something similar, maybe on a micro brand we've reviewed recently. Maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe they're buying their case backs from a similar manufacturer. Before we finish up on the back of the watch here, let's just talk about the bracelet. And the bracelet was a real surprise to me how much I liked it. It looks like a vintage bracelet that was perhaps pressed metal or something like that, but it's completely solid. They're using push pins here, so yeah, you could argue that it might be even more high quality with screw-in links, but the center, this highly polished center link, is separate, so it articulates very nicely, and the entire link is either chromed or it's been highly polished. I just like the way it looks. It's very distinctive, though I can't think of another bracelet that quite looks like this. The clasp is it's just a standard high quality fold over clasp. The fold over is very secure, and one of the things that makes it very comfortable, not just the actuation of the links on the bracelet, but also we have 4 layers of micro adjustment. A real fan of this bracelet. One of the things you can't tell from the photos online is the crystal. They've used a sapphire coated mineral crystal, so they haven't gone fully sapphire on this. It sits slightly proud, however, of the bezel, which gives a real nice distortion. It's got a nice bevel round the outside. It's not like a top hat sapphire, it's got a bevel on it. The dial, matte black, those vintage stick hands with the rectangular lollipop style second hand, applied indices on here, and everything else is painted. So the Selhor logo is painted on here, and then the 1 minute increments are also painted on here, and then automatic is painted on the bottom, as well as the surround around the date, which means that the applied indices stand out even more. What's also interesting about the hands is not only they're very flat, but they've got this red painted tip to them. I'm not quite sure I've seen anything like that. And then they have a rectangular inlay of Loom. Now, the Loom is nothing really to write home about. It's good enough, I would say. They haven't made a song and dance on the website about the compound or the consistency of Loom that they've used, or the type of Loom that they've used. One of the things that's interesting is that they list that there's white and green Loom, but I can only see the green Loom on the triangular pip here, which is unusual because when you see a bezel with that glass inlay, and this is glass inlay, you would expect the whole bezel to be loomed, but I can only get the triangle Loom pip to appear when I've been showing it under light. Since we're talking about the bezel, this is one of the things, the only thing that's really confusing for me about the watch is I don't know why they've done half black and half red. I can't find a dive reason why there's that split at 30 minutes. On Seiko watches, you certainly see red for the 15 minutes and the rest of the bezel, but I can't work out why they've split the bezel down the center. And we're used to seeing GMTs that are split across from the 9 to the 3, but I don't think I've ever seen a bezel that's split from the 12 to the 6 o'clock position. If you don't like that style, they do multiple different dial versions and also bezel versions as well, so you can go with a completely black bezel or you can go with a red bezeled version as well. Bezel has a glass inlay, so it's obviously protecting the text underneath it, but I think they could have gone for an aluminium bezel. That would have just completed the vintage look for me. I don't think the glass for me works with the whole vintage aesthetic, and I don't think a ceramic one would have either. And that's honestly my only gripe with this watch, because I think they've done a fantastic job of this. The way that the case is machined, that the fit of the bezel, bracelet, which I can't say enough good things about, quite honestly. Now let's get round to the price. So this watch is $550 US. That puts it to the mid to higher range of micro brands that we typically review on the channel, and I think that's down to the Miyota movement that they've used. So they've used one of the higher end 9015 movements, and it's a real sort of night and day for me between the Miyota 8000 series, which I would never buy a watch with the 8000 series again after experiencing it, to the 9000 series, which I think the 9000 series, from my personal view, is better than a lot of the Seiko mid-range movements. Keeps very good time, very quiet movement. This one is -3 seconds a day, which is fantastic. So it's got that higher end Miyota movement in it, a very nicely machined bracelet and case. I think that's where your money's going. Overall, I really like this watch, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of its styling? What do you think of the case size? And what do you think of the price? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you next time on Casual Watch Reviews. Thanks guys, bye.